Are great leaders born or made? We'll find out in Theories of Leadership, Great Man Theory. Here we have a list of leadership theories provided by changingminds.org. We'll go over each one of these briefly before we move on to the Great Man Theory. The Great Man Theory states that great men are born, not made. Trait theory suggests that people are born with traits more suited towards leadership, such as assertiveness and self-confidence. Behavioral theories are the opposite of the great man theory, in that they believe that great men are made rather than born. Participative leadership suggests that people are less competitive and more committed when working towards joint goals. Situational leadership suggests that effective leadership depends on a wide range of situational factors. Contingency theories state that there is no one best way to be a leader, and that one leadership theory may work well in one situation while not working well in another. Transactional leadership works through chain of command and states that people are motivated through reward and punishment systems. Transformational leadership says that people follow leaders who are inspirational and have a great vision. The Great Man Theory. The Great Man Theory, as stated before, believes that leaders are born and not made. It also believes that great leaders will arise when there is a great need. Examples of this throughout U.S. history are Benjamin Franklin and Abraham Lincoln. Entrepreneurs such as Walt Disney and Steve Jobs also embody the spirit of what the Great Man Theory believes. We will now quickly review the 5 power bases from which one person may influence another. Legitimate power is the belief that one person has the authority to exert influence, while others have the obligation to accept it. Expert knowledge comes from one's superior knowledge in a particular field, as well as the credibility with one's subordinates. When an individual tries to influence someone to reach mutual goals, it is often known as referent power. Reward power, as the name sounds, tries to influence people with the promise of something desirable. Coercive power is different than reward power in that rather than reward good behavior, it penalizes bad behavior. I believe that the Great Man Theory lends itself to the use of legitimate power for the exertion of influence over others, due to the fact that typically under the Great Man Theory you end up with leaders who are famous already or are of great wealth, and people tend to believe that they have the right to be in power. Let's talk about the abuse of legitimate power. If the leader comes in and exerts questionable authority, it can create image issues for a company. When you have employees that are incredibly loyal to your business and you put them into a situation where you tell them the company might fail if they don't move forward with this unethical decision, you end up with an ethical issue that is tough for people to deal with. This leads into the impossible situation of, I'm going to fire you unless you do this. While legitimate power has its drawbacks, it does have its benefits as well. If your leader has strong ethical character, it can do wonders for your customers and employees alike. The motivation factor will allow your employees to accomplish many great tasks. My last item talks about bringing entities back from the brink. And what I mean by this is simply when a company is on the brink of disaster, bringing in a great person can sometimes help give them the boost they need and move them onto the right track. A good example of this is the company Apple. After previously firing Steve Jobs, when the company was struggling to exist, they ended up bringing him back, and through his innovation and skills, he brought the company back to being the powerhouse it is today. Expert power is the other basis on which I believe that great men, coming from the Great Men Theory, will use to exert their influence on others. This is simply on the fact that you may believe that this person is the authority on a specific topic. You are going to listen to them because they are tried and true tested. Of course, expert power does have its ethical issues. One of them is manipulation. With expert power, it's very easy to manipulate someone into doing what you want them to do, whether that's ethical or not. The other issue is deceitfulness. Someone in a position of expert power can easily lie to someone, and that person would believe that without a question of a doubt this is to be truth. So you can see the issue that can arise there. Once again, I believe that the benefits outweigh the issues as long as your person in power is of ethical soundness. First of all, if your leader has strong ethics, the right decisions are being made and they're being made quickly. This does require strong ethical beliefs. When your leader is an expert, it benefits all involved. This includes customers and employees. There's much value to be gained from having someone on your side that is of expert power. So here's a quick overview of what we learned. We talked about the great man theory. What that means is that great men are born and not made. I then went on to discuss the two types of power that I believe lend themselves to the great man theory: legitimate power and expert power. Legitimate power is the belief that the person in charge has the authority to make the decision and that others have to oblige. Expert power talks about a person that has implied power based on credibility with its employees. In most cases, this is topic specific. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you found it both interesting and insightful.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hall, CEO of Global Integration. We are an ideas, consulting and training company that specialises in people management in complex, matrixed, virtual and global organisations. I'd like to share with you some of our ideas on working in these very complex organisations. In leading global teams and organisations, there are some additional challenges to overcome. In our training on global leadership, we help people to overcome 5 major barriers. The first is distance, and the fact that we are no longer face-to-face with colleagues we work with. This is probably the most intractable barrier. Human beings have evolved to operate face-to-face, and lack of that bandwidth of communication, the ability to monitor non-verbal messages and have substantial face-to-face time together, has big implications for trust, collaboration and communication. We have to develop the skills to stay in touch through technology and to create new forms of collaboration that will work without the same depth of relationships we were used to within the past. The second is culture. When people begin to work internationally, this is usually the first barrier they notice. Culture is very explicit and easy to spot. If you're new to them, cultural differences can cause frustration and misunderstandings. An ability to work across cultures is essential for the true global leader. Not just the ability to deal with other cultures, but to understand the impact of their own culture on the way they work and communicate. However, culture should not be seen as a separate topic. You go on a 2-day cross-cultural training and the job's done. Instead, an understanding of culture should infuse everything else you do. If you lead a global team, you need to be able to present to an international audience, negotiate with people who have a different negotiating style than you, communicate with people who get their point across in different ways, etc., etc. A true global leader is able to be flexible to lead people from other cultures, but also has a core of authenticity that enables them to be credible around the world. Because culture is so explicit, global leaders often develop the capability for dealing with the most obvious differences quite quickly. In many organisations, working across cultures has been normal for decades now, and they have developed the skills to overcome this barrier. You can find out more about our approach to this in the 3 Tools for Cross-Cultural Success videos on our YouTube channel or website. The third barrier is technology. It may seem strange to consider this as a barrier, as technology is also a critical enabler of global working. It would be hard to imagine leading a global team without the use of communication technology, wouldn't it? However, Communicating through technology can cause misunderstandings, and though the technology does not force us to communicate ineffectively, it can make it easy for us to miscommunicate. An obvious example would be the mass of poor quality emails that people routinely receive. A focus on the technology can also mean that leaders underestimate the need for participation and involvement. If we run a boring webinar, we may not be able to see that most participants are not engaged, or in fact are doing something else. With the massive messages arriving daily through email, instant messenger and other tools, the global leader needs to learn to master the technology, otherwise it can drive them. The fourth barrier is sheer complexity. Large organisations are very complex places, and decisions have implications beyond the immediately obvious. In particular, complex organisation structures such as a matrix, or the need to engage virtual networks to get things done, require a global leader to develop whole new skills of influence without authority, managing competing priorities, and creating diverse networks and alliances. This can be frustrating to leaders who've been used to getting things done through position or hierarchical power. The fifth barrier is created by time zones. Time zones are a permanent feature of global working. They're not going to go away, so we need to organise our work to reflect them. Failure to master working across time zones can lead to delay and frustration. You can see a separate video on our principles for working across time zones elsewhere on our YouTube channel or website. By building the necessary skills, global leaders can overcome these barriers and turn them into advantages. Global teams bring a wealth of diverse perspectives and enable you to take advantage of global scale and local skills around the world. We can use time zones to generate 24-hour working on critical issues and problems, and learning from around the world can improve our products and processes. For many organisations, global leadership is becoming business as usual. We just need to make sure our people have the skills to manage this reality. If you want to find out more about our global leadership training, please visit us at global-integration.com. Good luck.
Research shows that leadership may be difficult to teach, but research also shows that it can be learned. Stay with us to find out how you can learn to be a leader. We believe that leadership can be developed. So the question then arises is, how do you start your journey in leadership development? There are really three things that you have to think about. The first is, what kind of model or paradigm of leadership do you have in your mind? The second is that you have to develop a high level of self-awareness. And the third is then that you have to develop a set of skills around leadership. So let's take each of those in turn. The first stage in leadership development is to think about what you believe leadership is, because clearly what you believe leadership is, that's what you'll do in your leadership role. If you believe that it's about telling people what to do, that's what you're going to do. If you believe it's about developing people, well, that's what you're going to do. And an important part of that is whether you believe that leaders are born or can be made. Well, what does the research evidence say? Research on this shows that there's a heritability component in leadership. In other words, our genetic makeup contributes, we reckon, about a third to the behaviours that are involved in leadership. Now, what that means is that 2/3 can be developed based on experience. There's no doubt that modern organisations are changing, and changing very rapidly. The advent of social media, the globalisation of organisations, the changes in generations coming into the workforce are pushing us to a point where the kind of leadership that we're going to need will be different. Recently, the Hay Group in London produced a report called Leadership 2030, looking at the kind of leadership that's going to be needed as we move into the future. The Hay Group have identified that the characteristics that leaders are going to need include a deep ethical sense, a deep sense of intellectual curiosity, and very importantly, the ability to develop and sustain loyalty from a diverse group of employees over whom they may not actually have direct authority. That is a challenge for leadership development. So when you're thinking about your leadership journey, it's not sufficient to just think about leadership for today's world. You really need to be thinking about leadership for the world 5 years or 10 years from now. There's an emerging body of research that shows that transformational leadership works, and it works in modern organizations. The 4 key components of transformational leadership are, firstly, what we call idealized influence. Transformational leaders are people who are interested in the people they lead as much as in the task that they have to achieve. They operate out of a sense of integrity. They are people who really have the capacity to make leaders out of followers. Somebody once said that they lead with you and ahead of you. The second component is intellectual stimulation. So a transformational leader is somebody who questions the old ways of doing things, who pushes people to find new models, new questions, new ways of thinking about old problems. The third component is to do with motivation. Transformational leaders have the capacity to challenge and also to create meaning, to make work and work life interesting for the people that they work with. And the final component of transformational leadership is that they are concerned about individuals. They think about the needs of individuals for growth and achievement. And they have a capacity to work out how far somebody needs to be stretched, what their comfort zones are, and what their needs are to be developed. So if we take those 4 components together, somebody who meets those kinds of challenges under those components could be described as a transformational leader. Leadership is a complex subject, but leadership development needn't be. The important thing is to focus on the journey, the processes involved in the journey, both for our own personal leadership development and for the development of our organizations. I believe that by developing transformational leadership, both in ourselves and in our organizations, both we and our organizations will learn to adapt to the modern world, that we will be able to deal with the complexities that are emerging, we will survive and we will flourish. I hope you found some of these ideas useful for your own leadership development, and if so, I would encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel.